Been working on this video for a little while, guys, so excited for this one. So Mr. Steve Hawley, president of the American Single Malt Whiskey Commission, recently stated that the United States has long been absent from the global conversation about single malts. The days of America being a country where just bourbon comes from are over. Well, that is some fighting words, but he is not wrong. American single malt whiskey continues to be one of the most interesting spirits categories in the United States right now. New expressions from classic brands like Jack Daniel's, as well as the smaller brands pushing the envelope, are leading the charge for the next big trend in whiskey. This trend is whiskey is driving innovative ideas, higher proof points in American single malt, a focus on local terroir, and of course, questions on where to start in the category. Well, today we'll talk a bit more about the category and the bottles you should be seeking out to dive into this exciting category. Buckle in, it's gonna be a good one. It's the Mash and Drum. Welcome back to the Mash and Drum Whiskey Room. I am Jason C. Welcome back to the show. Like, subscribe, do all the things you need to do to help grow the channel for 2023. Thank you so much, WhiskeyTube family. So, American single malt, to some, may still be a foreign whiskey category, and it also, to some, it could be seen as a sin against the traditional of single malt Scottish whiskey. But with that said, American single malt has been booming over the last decade with enough diversity that reflects America's wide variety of climates, terroir, and agriculture. Now, pretty soon, the Tax and Trade Bureau, or TTB, will release an official definition of American single malt, the first new spirit category in years, and finally, a recognition that American single malt has arrived and entered the mainstream of whiskey. So before we get into the American single malts you should be trying, let's take a look at the proposed American definition of the category just to get you caught up. First and foremost, the proposed American definition is a lot less restrictive than Scotland's famously rigid rules. Now, like Scotch, American single malt would have to be made at one distillery using 100% malted barley. Now, a big difference is, while Scotch must be distilled on a pot still and aged for at least 3 years, neither requirement would exist for the United States. Now, another Scottish tradition, while it's not law, dictates that single malt Scotch be aged in used casks, generally ex-sherry, ex-port, or bourbon barrels, but American single malt would not have the same rule. The actual rule is just to be aged in an oak cask not exceeding 700 liters. This combination of rules and non-rules will give distillers a wide open range of barrels and flavors to shape the flavor of the malted barley with unbridled creativity, while over time creating a regionality to each and every single malt in different parts of the US, much like the Scotch regions that you're used to, like Speyside, Highland, and even Islay. Now, to finish off the proposal, much like bourbon, American single malt can be distilled to no more than 160 proof and has to be bottled at a minimum of 80 proof or higher. So there's a lot to like in those proposed rules. I think the one thing that I'm not that crazy about is the fact that you don't have to use a pot still. I think there's something to be said about using a pot still for single malt, especially single malt Scotch. It just gives it a creaminess and a texture that I think you don't always get from a column still. So that part makes me a little bit nervous, but I'm hoping that some of the distillers, and we will see in this list today, some of the craft distillers that are using pot stills to help shape their American single malts, which I think just add a little bit more of a texture to the whiskey. But here's the thing, American single malt isn't exactly new. Craft distillers have been releasing their own versions of the spirit for years now, even without the definition that we just went over. So with big names like Jack Daniel's and Jim Beam getting into the American single malt game, it's only a matter of time before everyone is. But before you run out and buy an American single malt from a big well-known name, from someone well-known in Kentucky or Tennessee, here are 10 of the best examples of American single malts you could find right now from around the US, each bringing something unique to the category based on the distillery's geographic location. First is Balcones, or Balcones, or however you want to say it, out of Waco, Texas. They've been producing various types of whiskey for many years, including corn whiskey, bourbon, rye, and single malt. In fact, the Balcones 1 Texas single malt is their flagship expression from the distillery. So it's distilled in pot stills, like I think it should be, aged in new American oak for about 2 years and bottled at 106 proof. Now, the hot climate of Texas and different barrel types they use for maturation give this whiskey big, bold, and rich flavors. Now, my personal favorite is the French oak finishes, along with an expression called lineage, which is made from a mash bill of Texas and Scottish grown barley and aged in both refill and new American oak barrels, giving it both a sweet and chocolatey type of flavor profile. So next one up is Westland out of the Pacific Northwest, making American single malt that really represents the character of the region. Now, Westland's master distiller Matt Hoffman draws inspiration from Pacific Northwest agriculture and culinary traditions to make the whiskey. So he uses brewer's yeast instead of distiller's yeast to ferment local varieties of barley, both of which change the whiskey's flavor. Now, even some of the wood used to make Westland's barrels is cut from a local species of oak, Quercus garryana. So garryana is part of the distillery's outpost range, but their core range of whiskeys include American oak, peated, and sherry wood, and they're great examples of the flavor range of Westland and what they can produce in that region. These whiskeys have everything from dark and smoky and chocolatey single malts to fruit-forward, spicy, and sweet flavors. I think Westland is a great example of how you can really use your region's location to your advantage and just creating all sorts of different flavor profiles. So to be clear, this list is in no particular order, but even though I'm mentioning Cedar Ridge from Iowa third, this is probably one of my favorites of all time right now. Now, Cedar Ridge makes great bourbon as well, but to me, their shining star is named the Quint Essential, named in part by master distiller Murphy Quint. Now, this is a single malt made from a mash bill of 100% two-row pale malted barley. This whiskey sets itself apart from some other American single malts because it is aged in several different barrel types instead of just new oak. It starts 2 to 3 years in ex-bourbon casks, and then it's used in brandy, rum, wine, port, or sherry barrels for 2 to 4 years before going into a large oak Solera vat to marry together. This bottle is their latest quintessential, handcrafted from 100% malted barley and aged in Cedar Ridge's bourbon barrels and then finished in a 132-gallon first fill sherry butt from Jerez, Spain, bottled at cask strength. This is honestly one of, if not the best American single malts I've had. Cedar Ridge is just doing incredible things. It's actually what's in my mash and rum glass right here. This thing has so much ridiculous flavor. It's rich, it's dense, it's got a lot of viscosity to it. It's got a lot of fruit-forward flavors from that sherry cask, the raisin, and dark chocolate. I think this thing can go against any single malt scotch you put in front of it. Next up is an OG, Stranahan's, who has been making their Rocky Mountain single malt since 2004. Now, the original expression is an American single malt, which is a blend of whiskey aged up to 5 years in new charred oak barrels. They also have the Blue Peak, which you see here, which is a 4-year-old whiskey that is finished using the Solera process. They also have an Oloroso sherry cask matured single malt. They have the Diamond Peak, which is a blend of 5 to 8 year Stranahan's finished in a specialty cask. They have the limited edition Mountain Angel, which is a 10-year-old whiskey, and they also have these cask strength single barrels, which are absolutely delicious. With all this variety and experience that Stranahan's under their belt, Stranahan's is a great place to start if you've never tried the American single malt category before. Highly recommended. Fifth on the list is ASW out of Georgia. ASW has been racking up awards and making unique whiskeys for a long time now. Their philosophy is calling themselves Southern Pot Still Pioneers in light of their unique hybrid approach to making whiskey when they combine traditional Scottish-style double copper pot distillation with Southern-style grain-in distillation. It's really a great combo for American single malt. Again, as I mentioned, these guys are using pot stills to really make these creamy American single malts. These guys are making everything else too, though. They're making bourbon, rye, gin, vodka, but their American single malts are just ridiculously good. If you're a fan of peated scotch, then try this one, which is the ASW Tire Fire, distilled from 100% heavily peated malt from Inverness, Scotland. They also have one finished in a rum cask. Also, their Maris Otter cask strength single malt and lightly peated Burns Night single malts are delicious too. They're all rich, complex, and can give any Scotch lover a reason to switch over to American single malt. Absolutely delicious stuff. Number 6 on the list, and another Pacific Northwest distillery great for introducing anyone into the category of American single malt, is Westward out of Portland, Oregon. Now, Westward is making a variety of expressions that stand out, including their core expression single malt that is fruity, floral, easy to sip. They also utilize Oregon stout casks and Pinot Noir casks for more variety, along with a cask strength version of the core expression. So they know what needs to be done to make good American single malt. They've been paramount in growing the American single malt category in the United States. Again, Westward could be one of those great places to start for those of you thinking about getting into the American single malt category. Now, this is the standard American single malt that they have. As I mentioned, they have the stout finish, and they also have the Pinot Noir finish. This one Fruity, light, floral, honey. But on the back end of this, it gives you this chocolatey coffee bean type note to it that I just think makes it absolutely fantastic to sip. It's a great place to start for American Single Malt Westward. Definitely check it out. Now, number 7 on the list is one you might have never heard of, but it packs a lot of flavor into an affordable bottle. It's called Bear Fight. Now, the whiskey starts in first fill bourbon barrels before it's vatted and then refilled into both peated smoked oak and ex-sherry casks for final maturation. Those barrels are batched and the whiskey is proofed to 90 before bottling. The age is at least 3 years old on this, and it's produced and bottled by a company called Next Century Spirits. Another fun fact when I was doing some research I had no idea is that this whiskey is endorsed by Seth MacFarlane, which is the creator of the show Family Guy. The quote he uses says, "There's a lot of whiskey out there, so for me to put my name on it, you know it's either great or I'm getting paid a ton of money. Well, they're paying me almost nothing, which means Bear Fight is a damn good whiskey." So this whiskey has some great flavors that I think lean more towards a typical Scotch lover, what they might like. It's got a little bit of smokiness to it. I would think of this in the category of more of a Highland, where it doesn't have a lot of smoke, but it has enough there to kind of keep things interesting. But there's a lot of sweet there. There's a lot of depth to it. I think when I first got this bottle, I really didn't know what to expect. I just kind of saw the labels like Bear Fight, American Single Malt. That sounds interesting. This bottle really surprised me, which is why it made the list. So I would definitely check it out. So number 8 on the list is another fantastic intro brand into American Single Malt, and it's from Virginia Distilling Company, who was again one of those early distillers in the US making American Single Malt. Now their flagship brand is called Courage and Conviction, which has a lineup of 3 cask types bottled at 92 proof: bourbon, sherry, and this one, which is the cuvee, sourced from red winemakers in Europe. This is 100% malted barley and fresh spring water fed from the Blue Ridge Mountains. Now they use hand-hammered copper pot stills crafted in Scotland to make it. The bourbon casks are from Kentucky, the sherry casks are from Fino, Oloroso, and Pedro Jimenez. Now on top of the 3 singular finished offerings, they also have their Courage and Conviction signature malt, which is a combo of 50% bourbon cask, 25% of their sherry cask, and 25% of the cuvee cask. Now for me, like the Bear Fight, this leans more towards a Scottish type of profile that is approachable, and I think could go head to head with some of your Scottish favorites. I think it's very, very fruit forward. I think that you get a little bit more of the raspberry, a little bit more of the strawberry type flavors in this, but then finishes again with a little bit of like a milk chocolate, maybe a little type of coffee bean note to it. This French cuvee, I think, really brings in more of the dark fruit flavors. Yeah, I get a lot of raspberry on this. I think it's an absolute, anytime I brought this out and told people, you want to try a good American Single Malt, try this one. I think this one really impresses them. Now, number 9 I wanted to bring up, and they are a great independent bottler that are sourcing some incredible American Single Malt casks and sometimes even blending them. The name is Lost Lantern, and they've quickly made a great name for themselves by seeking out craft distillers and finding the best representation of each of those whiskeys to put into their bottles. Now, when you talk about American Single Malt, they have sourced from Balcones, which we mentioned before, Del Bach, which is another great American Single Malt, Westland, Cedar Ridge, and more. Their vatted series includes several American Single Malts that have been blended together to create something truly unique. Now, the reason why I wanted to bring up Lost Lantern is because you can buy Lost Lantern in Kentucky, on Sealbox, and other places that can give you access to these American Single Malts that may not be offered in your area. It's another great way to taste the top tier offerings from some of the distilleries that I've mentioned already. Lost Lantern is doing a great job of putting a really nice spotlight on American Single Malt. Number 10, my last one, is probably the most impressive to me, and even though they were there at the beginning, still probably a bit of a hidden gem. So for my final mention, we are heading back to the West Coast in Oregon for McCarthy's American Single Malt by Clear Creek Distilling. Now for McCarthy's, you can argue that Clear Creek started the American Single Malt movement about 25 years ago, which is crazy when you think about how long these guys have been doing it. This whiskey is made from Islay peated malts that are sent to Oregon, where fermentation, distillation, and aging all takes place. Now their lineup is impressive. It includes an 85 proof 3-year American Single Malt, a 6-year 100 proof American Single Malt, a 6-year cask strength Single Malt finished in PX sherry casks, and a cask strength 6-year finished in Oloroso sherry casks. On top of that, they do release distillery and state only single cask selections that are absolutely phenomenal. The whiskey coming out of McCarthy's is what I hope all American Single Malts aspire to be. Bold, distinct, well crafted, that can easily stand up to the best from Isla, Speyside, and the Highlands, the Lowlands, or any other region you could think of, and maybe even sometimes exceed it. So if you're into Ardbeg, Laphroaig, or even Lagavulin, and you like those peated single malts from Scotland, this could go head to head with it. I'm telling you, put this stuff in a blind tasting against those. It's got all those characteristics that you know and love. I mean, it's incredible stuff. It's smoky, it's meaty, it's sweet. It's got a nice long finish. I love the proof points on these. It's incredible stuff. So last thing, if you're a big name bourbon producer thinking of getting into American single malt, this is the bar. 2-year, 80 proof, approachable American single malts are not gonna cut it because of all these great American single malts that I've mentioned. And for all of you watching, if you wanna get familiar with American single malt and what it can be, check these selections out. It's really incredible of the quality and what people have been making for years as the spirit is just starting to get popularized here in the United States. Also, if you have a great American single malt that I have not mentioned in this video, please leave a comment below and let me know what else I should be checking out. And, you know, I will try my best to try it and do a review of it. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video on the rise of American single malt and where to get started. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit that subscribe button below. Please hit the like button before you get out of here. And as I always say, it's not about the whiskey, it's the people you share it with. Cheers. Let me know down in the comments again any American single malts I've missed. And I'll see you next time right here on The Mash and Drum. This McCarthy's is ridiculous. Cheers, guys.